Welcome to the Talent Development Hot Seat. I'm your host, Andy Storch, and I'm excited that you're joining me today for another great episode and conversation to help you up your game and improve your capabilities in the world of talent development. And today we are talking about something that a lot of companies are dealing with, which is change and change management, as well as field enablement. So if you're involved at all in sales enablement, or commercial side of the business, field enablement is going to be useful for you, as well as a little bit of career development as well. My guest today is Brittany Honor, who is a resilient leader with over 12 years of experience in the medical device and CPG industries. As a certified professional coach, she empowers others not just to play, but change the game, something I want to ask about. Throughout her life and career, Brittany has navigated challenges with resilience, using each setback as an opportunity to grow and refine her purpose. She believes that clarifying one's values is the foundation for meaningful success and approaches every endeavor with intention and authenticity. Brittany also understands the transformative power of a strong network. Her ability to build and nurture connections has shaped her professional journey and allowed her to create spaces where others can thrive. And in addition to her corporate experience and coaching expertise, Brittany is the host of the podcast Chess, Not Checkers, where she explores the journeys of game-changing leaders, uncovering the mindset, strategies, and resilience behind their success. And I was lucky enough to be a guest on that
Yes,
show
sir.
recently. And she also shares bite-sized wisdom through her Quick Tip Tuesday series, offering actionable advice to help her followers grow personally and professionally. Brittany, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Andy. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
I am as well. You and I have had a chance to get to know each other through a few conversations over Zoom over the last few months. You interviewed me for your podcast. I've just
Yeah.
been so impressed with your energy and your passion and your curiosity around all the things that we have talked about. I want to ask you about the podcast and the coaching, some of the things you're doing on the side, but I want to make sure we spend some time on the corporate work that you're doing because I think that will be really relevant to a lot of our listeners. And I always like to start with a little bit of background. How did you get into the L&D space and what are you doing today?
I feel like getting into L&D, also my sales background, everything's been almost by accident,
Mm.
or even by chance. And it's just been through different experiences. I started off in the CPG industry doing various leadership roles. And thinking back on my career, I used to host these development conferences
Mm.
through different things that we would do at Pepsi. But about 3 years ago, I got into the L&D space here at my organization. And I was focused specifically on leadership development, where I was looking at our leadership development programs, doing the specific needs assessments to understand, okay, what are the gaps of our leadership team and how do we appropriately develop those team, the future leaders of our organizations to be ready to be able to take that charge. Because I think oftentimes what we see, not just here, but at other organizations, is when people get promoted into leadership, they become what we call here super salesmen rather than true sales leaders.
Mm.
And what they want to do is do the role that they did before and have everyone do it the same way that they did,
Right.
rather than taking on a more leadership role and influencing others to go be great, but be great in their own way.
Mm. Yeah, I've read and looked at different studies around the challenges that come with promoting highly successful individual contributors into leadership roles. And this happens in every type of function, but I feel like sales is one of the kind of poster childs for this, where you take someone that's really good at sales and you're like, okay, well, now you're going to be the sales manager, which is a completely different job. And I think there are
Mhm.
studies that show that when successful sales professionals are promoted into sales manager roles, a lot of times the performance goes down both for them and the organization, right? Because it's not what they're used to doing.
Absolutely, because they're used to focusing on self and
Hmm.
succeeding for themselves.
Yeah.
And when you're a leader, you have to lift up your team so they can succeed and the team overall succeeds. So it's a mindset shift that has to happen that a lot of super salespeople or individual contributors, they have a really hard time making that shift.
Hmm.
But so that's one of the biggest challenges that we're facing here is how do you switch that mindset from being a super salesperson to being an effective leader in the organization?
I'd be curious, just based on your own experience, and a lot of people listening may have different opinions, but when you're looking for a sales manager, do you think it's better to take the superstar salesperson who's done well in sales, promote them, and give them the proper training and development to teach them how to be a good manager, or look for someone who understands sales but may not be the best at selling, but it's clear that they have good leadership qualities and know how to lead teams and promote them into that sales manager role? Which do you think is better?
Yeah. You know, I don't think there's a playbook of
Mm.
which is right and which is wrong. It varies by situation because there's some situations where some people are able to make that shift, and then there's others where they're not. But what we have seen is if you focus more so on transferable skills, okay, I
Mhm.
have this team, there's a vacancy for a leader. This is what this team needs. Who of the candidates has these skills or has the ability to be a sponge to be able to develop these skills over time? I think that's more so the focus that hiring managers should have is what are those transferable skills that are needed and who has those. But I think
Yeah.
oftentimes what people get caught up in, specifically in the sales industry, is this person award winning? Have
Mm.
they got walked across the stage? Do they have all these accolades? And I think that's great. And
Mhm.
people have worked really hard to achieve that. But sometimes what we see is that that doesn't translate to leadership. That
Right.
just means that they're a really good salesperson.
Right. And oftentimes, and it's not always the case, but I've worked in sales a long time. Oftentimes the people who are the best at sales are the most selfish, who are not
Oh,
thinking about other people, right? And possibly even a little bit toxic to the culture, but you keep them around because they
yeah.
produce a lot of revenue. These are always the challenging trade-offs that organizations are making.
Yeah, I've seen it across so many different organizations is that sometimes the salespeople aren't the best leaders. And it's unfortunate. And then it turns into they get into a leadership role and they ultimately end up being exposed. And
Mm.
then they become unhappy in the role that they're in. And then it's just a downward spiral from
Right.
there.
Yeah. Then you lose them as the salesperson, you lose the sales manager, you lose
Oh,
them
yeah.
completely. So there's got to be a better way. And I think implicitly you might think, well, it's better to look for someone with the leadership qualities. Maybe they haven't been as good at sales. But the problem is in sales, above probably just about any other function, when you get a manager or even someone creating training, one of the first questions is, well, what have you sold? Right.
Yeah.
And people want to know, like, what's your street cred? Otherwise, I don't want to listen to you.
Absolutely. When I entered into the device industry, that was my biggest hurdle in the
Mm.
interview process was, okay,
Mm.
what have you sold? Yes, you've led
Mm.
teams,
Yep.
but what have you sold? And what were your numbers and what were your performance? And I had to dig in the vault of like, these are my transferable skills. This
Yeah.
is why it matters to you and your organization. And
Right.
this is what you're going to get out of it. And I'm very fortunate to be able to have been given this opportunity because
Mm.
there's so many people that don't either have the sales experience or the device industry experience to be
Mm.
able to make that entry into organizations such as
Yeah.
this.
Let's talk about change, because
Mhm.
this is something I know you're dealing with a lot with, and so many organizations are dealing with some realm of change and transformation. And oftentimes, when we're making changes, whether it's strategy changes, we're introducing new products or technology to be used, there's often a lot of resistance to
Oh
that.
yeah.
And we in L&D and HR have to figure out how do we lead the charge and get people aligned and moving in the direction that the leadership wants to go. So how do you think about change management and making big changes inside organizations?
I feel like change is the only constant in life is change,
Right.
personally and professionally. That is something that's going to continue to happen is things are going to ever be evolving and changing. And I think within the industry, it's constantly changing, introducing new products, new teammates, new ways of doing business, but teams fight it so much. And
Mm.
I think as L&D professionals, we're fired up about it because we can see the long game and the strategy. But I think oftentimes where it goes wrong is we see the strategy and the long game and where it's going, but we don't articulate why. And we don't articulate that strategy well enough for people to understand why that excitement exists and why they should be fired up about it. So it gets a little complicated whenever we're trying to implement any sort of change because of the lack of communication sometimes, as well as people love doing things the way in which they've
Hmm.
always done it.
Hmm.
And I think it's just the way of being. It's comfortable being
Yeah.
able to do things the same way that you've always done it, day in and day out. But unfortunately, and it sounds so cliche, in order to grow, we have to continue to evolve and change.
Hmm. So, how do you think about getting people aligned around those changes? The tempting thing, I've seen it many times in organizations, is we'll send an email out and let everybody know, hey, this is what we're doing, get on board, and that should be that. And you and I know, of course, and everyone listening knows that's not enough to convince
Yeah.
people. They if they even read it, they delete it, they move on, they get back to their old ways. So, what are the steps or things that we need to be thinking about to really get people on board and aligned to big changes?
It's more so when we send those emails, it's if they read it. Usually
Right.
they'll delete it or they
Yeah.
don't read it at all. But
Right.
I think one of the most critical steps is communication. I learned this in the CPG industry with one of the HR professionals I worked with is whenever we're rolling out any sort of change, the focus group that's working on this change, we're pumped, we're excited, we want to roll this out, we want to get this across the goal line, but there's so many different nuances that come with it and so many different pieces that are critical for this change to be successful. And a lot of time teams don't want to wait for all those pieces to be completed, and
Mhm.
so they want to just go. But it's really critical that before we communicate, that every piece, as much as possible, is put together. Because the worst thing that you want to do is roll out a change, and there's a critical piece that they're like, oh, I don't have all the answers to that yet, and I don't know when I'm going to be able to get that answer to you. You lose trust in your team, you lose the confidence in your team, and then you're working an even greater uphill battle whenever you're trying to roll out that change, as well as whenever it comes to communication. What another critical piece that I learned from that HR professional is that you communicate with the most impacted group first.
Mhm.
Whoever is the most impacted group with this change, that's who you need to communicate first because they are being personally impacted, and everyone takes change so personal.
Mhm.
Even if it's a good change, they take it personal. So communicating with the most impacted group first and then communicating with the least impacted groups afterwards.
Okay, so most impacted to least impacted. What about the role of leadership and
Mhm.
how they're involved? Because the managers are the ones who are speaking with people day in, day out and communicating that change, right?
Yeah, I think as a manager, it's so hard during change because oftentimes what we see is a lot of our managers, they are the translators
Hmm.
of the change. So they're getting the change from someone else, then having to translate it to their team. And it's so critical that they're watching their tone, that they're watching the way in which they're delivering it. Because if I'm like, okay, guys, we have this change coming, it sucks. It's going to be painful. It's going to be long, your team's going to be like, "Oh my gosh, what's going to happen?" And they just don't receive it well.
Hmm.
So it's really important that they are translating it to their team effectively. What's in it for them? What's the outcome? How is this going to benefit the team and why they need to do it? I think that's so critical and so important that they are effectively translating that.
Okay, so what about technology? I know this is something you deal with, and most people that deal with field, salespeople are going to deal with getting them to use a CRM or some other type of technology that we want them to use. We know overall is going to make things better, but is quite frankly considered a pain in the butt, right? For a lot of people that use it, they don't want to use it. But the organizations invest a lot of money in it, right? How do you think about how have you seen companies successfully roll these things out and get people on board?
Yeah. I think companies, when they successfully roll these things out, of being able to get people on board with it is through listening. I think
Mhm.
I talk a lot about communication, and a lot of people think that communication is just how you deliver information, but communication's also how you're listening to people and
Mhm.
listening to what are your needs, what are your complaints, what are your hesitations with adopting this, because that helps you understand, okay, what are the changes that I need to make to this technology to make sure that it's the best resource for our team. So what we do a lot of is listening. I think
Mm,
as an L&D professional, I mean, we do needs assessments and understanding, okay, what is the true team's needs for delivery of a training, but you take that same approach whenever it comes to technology and doing a needs assessment. What are the team's needs? Why do we need them to use it? Why do they need to use it? And how do they need to use it? And making sure that we're making the appropriate changes so it's easy to use. I know nothing's easy, but we want it to be easy to use because the is the more difficult it's going to be for teams to be able to adopt that technology.
what do you see as the biggest barriers to change these days, or what are organizations running into, and how do we overcome those?
Yeah. I think one of the biggest barriers currently is change fatigue.
Mm,
There is so much changing professionally, personally, all over the place that people are really spun
mm,
and they're just tired and they don't know how to just take all the changes that are constantly happening and it's starting to bleed over. You know, people talk a lot about work-life balance, but it's all starting to bleed in because there's constantly change. And I think people are facing change fatigue. But it's unfortunate, but change, it's never gonna stop.
right.
So we just have to learn to, once a change happens, it's okay to be like, okay, this sucks.
Hmm.
I don't like this. And to feel what you're going to feel, but don't
Yep.
let those feelings last too long and linger
Mm.
too long. You have to learn to kind of go with the flow, and it kind of helps you be able to process through the various different changes that are going on.
You mentioned like the constant in life is change, and change is going to continue. There's going to be more, and it seems like the pace we're at, we're going to keep seeing more and more change, right? It's not going to stop. So what I'm hearing is really a lot of it's about mindset, right? And helping people
Oh,
understand
yeah.
that change is never going to stop. So you got to think more about how can you embrace this, make the best of this situation rather than spending so much time fighting it.
Absolutely. It's so critical. When I think about change, I think oftentimes about a book that I read. It was a few years ago, and I ended up doing a training on it. It's by John Gordon called The Coffee Bean.
Hmm.
And what he tells in the story is life sometimes can feel like a boiling pot of water, but you have the opportunity to decide how you're going to respond. Are you going to be a carrot, an egg, or a coffee bean? So when life becomes a boiling pot of water, are you going to become mushy like a carrot? Are you going to become hardened like an egg? Or are you going to be that coffee bean and change your environment by having the right response, the right mindset, and turning that boiling pot of water into a hot cup of coffee?
Ooh, I like when coffee beans turn into hot cups of coffee. Yeah.
Me too, especially if it's a double espresso.
Espresso macchiato.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, we like that, and they're really adapting to the situation, I guess. Let's talk about field enablement. I know that not everyone listening works in field enablement, but we do have some people who are in sales enablement, field enablement, can probably relate to some of the challenges that come with that. I think one of the unique challenges is, look, right now at this point in time, it's hard to get anybody to come to training and development programs, right? Everyone is really busy. They're working
Mm,
probably more than ever. But I feel like with sales, especially, there's always this kind of question of, is this worth my time? Because if I'm not
yeah,
selling, then we're
yeah.
not making money. So why should I be in this program? So how do you think about development for, especially for salespeople?
Absolutely. Whenever it comes to field enablement and it comes to technology and development, what I've learned one of the most critical pieces is, again, understanding what's going on in their world.
Mhm.
So I try to make a point to sit on a lot of our leadership calls and the team meetings to understand what's going on in their world. Because as you said, salespeople are moving a million miles per hour and they're constantly on the go.
Mhm.
And anytime you have to make them stop, they're ticked off.
Mhm.
So if I can figure out, okay, what's going on in your world and how does what I have as a field enablement manager, how does it accompany what you have going on and how can it help you get even faster. I think that helps them going back to the change of being able to adopt anything that we're doing or want to be eager and want to know what we're teaching at these trainings if it helps them be better.
So it starts with the question of, is this going to help them be better and how, not just am I ticking a box or, and I imagine this is a question that so many L&D leaders deal with is someone comes to you and says, we need training for these people on X, right? I see you rolling your eyes already. And are you stopping to evaluate that and decide, do we really, or is it something else? How do you think about that?
Oh man, again, it goes back to the question asking. We get that all the time. My team needs a training on effective communication. We get that all the time of
Yeah.
we need a training on effective communication or we need a training on what
Negotiations or something, right?
negotiation. And it's like, okay. And then by the time you ask questions and get to the bottom of it, it's like, oh, your team actually has trust issues.
Mm,
You all need training on building trust with one another or having a healthy work environment. And it's so funny when someone says we need a training on X,
mm-hmm,
after doing those needs assessments and asking those questions, you realize, okay, you actually need a training on Y.
mm-hmm.
Maybe the effective communication is an outcome, but the goal here is actually going to be working on building the trust of the team.
Right. So what kind of questions do you ask there? Obviously, you want to find out what's the ultimate objective, what's the problem, what are you trying to achieve, right?
Yeah, I'm asking, okay, what's your end game? Where at the end of this training, what do you want your team to be doing?
Mm-hmm.
And then I ask, okay, what's current state? And also, I don't just stop at who's the leader of the team. I'm also pulsing the people that are on the team because it's always interesting when you have a leader of a team come to you and say, "Hey, we need to do a training on X. This is what my problem is. I've written out the problem statement, all of these things." And then when you pulse their team, it's like, okay, I think I see where the disconnect is
Mm.
because everyone's not having the same vision. So really trying to ask questions of like who, what, where, why to understand the landscape of what's going on really helps get down to the root cause of what's needed during a training.
And do you have any of those situations where someone's asking for training for their team, but it's really more about one or two people, or really it might be more about coaching or mentoring than necessarily a development program?
Oh yeah, I've had a former classmate of mine reached out to me and said, "Hey, I would love for you to come in and be a consultant for my team. We're going through a lot of change and this and that, and people are pushing back." And I was like, "Sure thing." Started doing my needs assessment, and I was like, "Hey, buddy, I got some news for you. I don't think it's the team. I think it's you
Oh,
as the leader." And thankfully we had that sort of relationship. Again, going back to building trust, we had
yeah,
trust with one another that he was able to receive that.
yeah.
And I'm really big on when I'm working with someone of asking them, okay, how do you like to be communicated with?
Mm,
I'm really, really, I lean on that heavy to understand, do you like it like information direct
hmm.
or not direct? And so I let him know, and he was shocked.
Hmm.
And he pushed back on it, and I let him sit in his feelings. But when we connected again a week later, he's like, I thought about it. You were right. I think it was me. And it ended up turning into
Wow.
one-on-one coaching of how can he effectively communicate with his team. And then after a while, it did turn into some sort of development for his team, but
Mhm.
it started with him as a leader.
Right. It's a good reminder. You've been running leadership development for a long time myself, and studied and used to run programs based on multipliers by Liz Weissman. And it's a reminder that most quote unquote bad managers who are making their teams miserable don't show up with that intent. They don't
Yeah,
realize that what they're doing is driving their team crazy, and without that awareness, they
absolutely.
can't change.
Yeah, they don't realize that it starts with you. And
Yeah.
it's so funny. I was actually coaching another leader a few weeks ago, and he said, "Well, why is it all on me? This should be shared responsibility." And I think a lot of people, when they step into leadership roles, they
Mm.
struggle with that of
Yeah.
why is it on me? But
Yeah.
it's what is it? To whom much is given, much is required.
Hmm.
been given this opportunity to lead this team. So you do have the responsibility
Hmm.
to lead the charge. And you have that added responsibility on you
Right.
that you kind of have to come to terms with. And a
Yeah.
lot of people, they don't want to
Yeah.
because it's painful.
Yeah, yeah, I don't know if you follow Gary Vee, big
Hmm.
hero of mine. He talks a lot about accountability,
Oh,
especially in
yeah.
leadership, that when you just assume that everything is your fault, it actually becomes a lot better
Oh,
because you take
yeah.
ownership and you navigate things better and you can change things instead of just, blaming other people for your problems.
Absolutely. When you look at a situation and say, okay, what did I own in this?
Hmm.
And know that you played a part in this as a leader, it helps because then you're not blaming. Because I think the first line of defense is like, well, this person did this person did this. And it
Yeah.
always takes me back to when I was a child. My mom would say, well, Brittany, what did you do?
Hmm.
And you kind of have to ask yourself that, okay, Brittany, what did I do in this situation as a leader that could have
Yeah.
made this situation better?
Yeah, just a reminder, this is such a very simple example, but I have a virtual assistant who was doing some work for me recently, and I went and looked and said, this is not the way I wanted her to do it. And I went to give her feedback because I'm big on that because that's the only way we can improve. And she said, I didn't know you wanted me to do it that way. And I said, well, I told you. And I looked at my email and I'm like, oh no, I didn't actually, I did not clearly communicate that at all. That was clearly on me. And I said, I will get better at communicating with you in the future because that's the only way we're going to
Absolutely.
improve, right?
Yeah, that's the only way we can improve is taking ownership, but also when we make mistakes, owning that as
Hmm.
well
Yeah,
and saying, oh, I thought I communicated that to you, but I
I
didn't.
didn't. Yeah.
I apologize. And it's so amazing how just like taking ownership and admitting when you're wrong,
Hmm.
how that plays a huge part with your team of
Hmm.
just I'm human. I made a mistake. It's so funny. Before I joined the leadership team, I had put a lot of our leaders on such a high pedestal. But
Mm.
then whenever you join them, it's like, wait, you're human just like me. You have insecurities just like me. You make
Yeah.
mistakes just like me. But I think oftentimes leaders put themselves on a pedestal and don't
Right.
show that I make mistakes. I have these insecurities. I'm also working to get myself promoted or
Right.
whatever that
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
And it kind of takes a little bit of like the humanity out of
Mhm.
it. And we have to get back to that of just being grounded in who we are and our values.
Yeah. Everybody has hopes and dreams and challenges and mistakes that
Everyone.
they've made. But the problem is the challenge is for leaders. I've noticed again in running a lot of leadership development programs myself, one of the biggest challenges for leaders is that pressure to act like you've got it all together, to have all the
Absolutely.
answers, to not admit that you're wrong. Even though when you ask most people today, what do you want from your leader? I hear a lot. I want them to be human. I want them to be authentic. I want to connect with them. I No one ever says I need my leader to be perfect or have all the
Hmm.
answers. In fact, they might
Hmm.
say, I want them to give me more responsibility, to challenge me more, to let me have more autonomy.
Oh,
So you
yeah.
don't have to have the answers. You really just need to have, be able to bring a team together and motivate them to do the things they need to do.
Absolutely. People talk about authenticity all the time,
Mhm.
and I don't think that they truly know what that means of
Yeah.
just being your true self. I think back to being a manager for a first time. I tried to act like I knew the answers to everything.
Hmm.
I clearly didn't. I was 24 years old, leading a large complex team. I had no clue what I was doing. I was 2 years out of college.
Yeah.
I clearly had no idea what I was doing. And so this time around, now that I'm leading a team, I am quick to admit when I've messed up,
Hmm.
when I've maybe communicated too early or any of those things. And I would like to believe that my team now respects me more because of that. But
Hmm.
I think all like you said, people want to seem perfect, but none of us are perfect and
Right.
that we have it all together.
Yeah.
We're all continuously learning.
Yeah.
But I will say for myself as well, I respect my managers more when they say like, "Hey, I don't know that, but let me try to figure that one out." It just means more.
Yeah. I know you do career coaching as well as leadership coaching. Obviously, career development is a topic that I'm passionate about and talk to a lot of people about. Where do you see people struggling the most with career development or with their own careers right now?
Yeah, I think a lot of times where people struggle is with clarifying their values. I
Mm,
think people think when you clarify your values, it needs to be something that you do personally and that it doesn't affect your professional life. But it's so important to clarify your values, what you believe in, what is it that you're going to stand for, what is your North Star. We talk about objectives in L&D space, but your values are your North Star personally. And it's so important to have alignment with those in your professional career. In my career, I took roles because of the title, because of the promotion, because of the money. And I was so unhappy because I wasn't doing what was in alignment with my values and the things that were most important.
mm.
And so when I'm coaching my clients, that is probably one of the first things that we start with is a values exercise
Okay.
and doing some work to identify, okay, what is my North Star as a person? And what is it that I want to focus on? And what you find a lot of times in people are just doing jobs to pay the bills. They're not doing jobs because they're passionate about it.
Right. Well, I'm curious. First of all, I wonder if you can give me an example of, someone discovering values and how those align, and what are maybe the trade-offs there? Because a lot of people may say, well, that's great, but my passion is painting or making art, and that's not something I'm really going to get paid for. So I can't necessarily pursue a career that aligns with my passion, but there may
Mm.
be opportunities to align the work you're doing more with the values you have. So how can people really get more clarity on the values they have? And maybe do you have an example you can share of either yourself or someone
Absolutely.
else?
Absolutely. I'll say, oh, I see it a lot of times with school teachers.
Hmm.
They love teaching. I'll call them babies because that's my mom's a kindergarten school teacher and she calls her students her babies. My mother loves her babies. Teachers love their babies. They love their students, but they went to school for education and they feel like that's the only route that they can go. But what I found through coaching quite a few teachers is that there's certain aspects that they love about teaching that they can find in other avenues.
Hmm.
What we see in the device industry is a lot of nurses making the transition over. There's aspects that they love about nursing, but whenever you get that balance of understanding what are the things that you value, maybe you can't find that perfect job, but maybe you can find a job that encompasses the things that you enjoy.
Mhm.
So, in nursing, if you enjoy the business, if you enjoy interacting with the patient, if you enjoy the effective communication, that could translate over here to the medical device industry. And
Mhm.
so sometimes it's about, okay, figuring out what do I value within my career? When did I laugh the hardest? When did I cry the hardest? What did I enjoy the most? Okay, what is out there that can help me achieve that? And
Mhm.
figuring out who do you know, what do you know in order to be able to get there.
I do think something that's missing, or one thing that's missing for a lot of people in the corporate world, is self-awareness, something I talk a
Mhm.
lot about in my book and keynotes. Really just taking that time to reflect and think about who you are and how you got to where you
Mhm.
are, what you like and don't like about the work that you're doing, and what you maybe want to be doing more of and less of in the future, and to get clear on your strengths and weaknesses and your values. Sometimes people ask me, how do I dig deeper and understand my values? And I know there's a lot of values exercises out there
Mhm.
on the internet. Is there anything that you recommend that for people that are listening, thinking, okay, I want to get more clear on my values?
Yeah, the Wheel of Life is always a really good one that I enjoy. And I like to go back and just reference it, as well as journaling has been so helpful. But to
Mm,
your point, a lot of people don't realize it takes work to identify what your values are.
mm,
And I think we're like in an Amazon mindset where we want stuff to be solved
yeah.
immediately and
Mm,
be on your doorstep in less
right.
than 24 hours. But things like clarifying your values and figuring out what you want to do, it takes time
Hmm.
and you have to be able to slow down. But I think that's why COVID, it was so impactful
Hmm.
and devastating, but I think it forced a lot of us to slow down
Hmm.
and to be with our thoughts and to be with our families and to realize what's truly is important and to really slow down and to focus on those things. And I think a lot of people got clarity through that time, but we have to figure out, okay, in our day-to-day life, how do we find time to be with ourselves, to be with our thoughts, and
Mm,
identify what's important, what's moving us, and what's the direction we want to go in.
Yeah, and something I learned too from doing values exercises long ago is that it's not that you only identify with a few. You may identify with a lot of different things, but what's the most important to you? And that
Exactly.
helps you make decisions about the job and career, and especially how you spend your time, because you can say success and family are important, but there may be a decision where you could either work late or you could go to your kid's soccer game, and neither one is right or wrong. But if family is the most important thing to you, then maybe you make less money, but you're there
Mhm.
for the soccer game. And I think about those things in my own work all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really interesting, but sometimes life has a way of forcing you to figure out what's most important. I think
Mhm.
about myself and like those pivotal events. When my mother got sick,
Mm,
that caused my life to go from 180 miles per hour to just completely halt.
mhm.
Because it's like, okay, the matriarch of our family is down for the count. We don't know if we're going to lose her. What's important in this moment? Is it the promotion? Is it the team? Is it the money? No, it's
Yeah,
my family.
right.
This is my fuel. This is my fire. Like, this is what gets me going. And I think that was one of the pivotal moments to help me understand, okay, this is what's important. And this is what I need to keep as my North Star is
Yeah,
family. And from
yeah.
that moment, that's when I was like, okay, all the moving has kind of got to halt. Let's start to make our way back to Florida.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that something I say to other people and try to remind myself, it's not easy because there's always work to be done. But I don't
Mhm.
think we ever regret choosing family or health in these tough situations, because
Never,
those are the things that are going to be most important to us at the end of the day.
never.
It's almost guaranteed that you will, when we get to the end of our lives, no one will say, "I wish I would have sent one more email." But
Yeah,
right, but they'll say, "I wish I spent more time with my mom," or "I wish I took
exactly.
more care of my health." Like that. That's absolutely said by a lot of people.
Absolutely. You wish you never regret doing the things that's most important to you.
Yeah. Okay. So
Right.
that leads me to the last question. You say in your bio and your podcast, you coach people not just to play, but to change the game. I'm curious, what does that mean?
Absolutely. It's all about life. It's not a game of chance. It's about strategy and figuring out what do you value, what's most important, what is it what you want to do, and how do you make it happen.
Mm,
And it's all about not just playing, but learning how to change the game. I think oftentimes people take jobs and it's like, okay, the person before you, they did it this way. So this is how you can do it. And you can easily do that. But what I really challenge myself and what I challenge my clients to do is how do you change what it is that you're doing to make it work for you? And how
mm.
do you make the biggest impact to be able to fill your cup up at the end of the day?
Yeah, I see that very much in alignment with owning your career and life and
Absolutely.
living with intention, right? Thinking about how do
Absolutely.
you want your career and life to look, and can you mold it that way? Knowing everybody comes from different backgrounds, has different situations, different jobs, different bosses, different colleagues, different family situations, right? We all have different situations, but what can you do to design
Yep.
things intentionally and make the most of the situation that you
Absolutely.
have? Well, Brittany, I think we have done the best we can to make the most of this
Yeah.
situation. Uh,
Absolutely.
Such a great conversation. I appreciate you coming on to share all that you have about change management, about field enablement, about career development, and about changing the game in life. This has been awesome. If anybody wants to get in touch with you, maybe find out about coaching or anything else, where's the best place for them to go?
Absolutely. They can check me out on Instagram at Honored Development, as well as my website, honoreddevelopmentandconsulting.com. And I'm also available on LinkedIn. And the last thing I would like to say is I think this interview right here and you being on my podcast is a testament to the power of networking
Yeah,
and utilizing your social media as a networking device. I mean, we sent each other a message on LinkedIn and
yeah,
look at where it has come. And I'm
yeah.
excited to see where it'll go in the future.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, you reminded me of one more question I wanted to ask. I think this is really interesting, especially for me as I've been doing more work in the personal brand space. You have a full-time corporate job at L&D.
Mhm.
You are creating a lot of content on the side with your podcast, doing some coaching, and you have this Instagram channel where you're creating some tips on leadership and learning and development. And you told me last time we talked that you have colleagues that watch those and see those and compliment them and say they appreciate it. I think of maybe the older days where if you got
Mhm.
caught doing things like that, your
Oh
boss might
yeah.
say, "Hey, what are you doing over there? You need to be spending your time over here." How do you think about both that balance and how it benefits both you and the organization to be doing things on
Absolutely.
the side?
Well, it's so funny. I have a lot of colleagues that say, "Hey, I appreciate it," but I do also have a lot of colleagues that say, "Why are you doing this? This
Mm,
makes no sense.
yeah,
How are you doing your job?" And I think they have questions, and I have no problem answering that.
yeah.
But I feel so fortunate to work for an organization that values people coming to work as their true selves and
Mm,
understanding that people have passions. Some people like coaching their children's baseball teams or basketball teams.
mm.
My passion is coaching and developing others. And I work for an organization that recognizes that and encourages it. I mean, my boss now, he listens to all my podcast
That's
episodes and
amazing.
comments on them. Yeah. And so we have great conversations. And I will say, through interviewing different people or providing these tips, it's helped me be a better leader. It's
Right.
helped me be a better friend. It's helped me be a better colleague just by learning different things from various people.
Yeah.
And I think it's just made me a more well-rounded and honestly a happier employee.
Yeah. Oh, I bet. It is funny. Everybody spends their free time outside of work in different ways. It's just that what you're doing is more public. And so people can question it. But if someone found out that you were coaching a softball team or a soccer team for 10 hours a week, which can happen, right? No one would
Yeah.
question that and be like, what are you doing
Yeah.
with your
No one would
free
say,
time?
why? Yeah.
Why are you
Why
spending
are you
time?
doing
Why
this?
are you
Yeah.
doing
But
this?
it's
Why
like,
are you volunteering at the Boys and Girls Club? This is inappropriate.
exactly. No, no one would say that, but because I choose to live out loud, it
Yeah.
kind of comes with the
Yeah.
with par for the course.
I've
But
been there.
that's okay. And it actually, I think there's some people that I've spoke with about it, and they see my passion for it, and they're
Yeah.
like, I get it. I
Yeah.
truly get it.
Right. Well, I love that you're doing it. And I love talking with you. And I look forward to talking more in the future. So thanks again for coming on, Brittany. We'll talk more soon.
Likewise, Andy. Appreciate you.